This episode of Prem Brulee is sponsored by the Vintage Wave, an online boutique sports apparel store with throwbacks and unique one-of-a-kind vintage goods. From new Mitchell & Ness looks to classic Nike and Adidas looks, the Vintage Wave has everything a sports or fashion fan could need. Visit them online at thevintagewave.com.
You're listening to a Holyfield podcast.
The number one podcast in your headphones is back. Welcome to another edition of Prem Brulee. Like I've told you in previous episodes, sometimes we'll have co-hosts, sometimes it'll just be me, and this is one of those times. So for this edition, this week's recap in sports using rapid fire category form, it'll just be your boy, Premal Bot from Holyfield, holding the fort down until another episode. So without further ado, we've been leading off each episode with Yeah Fam or Nah. This one's no different. Week 2 of the NFL. This was pretty much the week of the lack of the week of the kicker. Yeah Fam or Nah to games being determined like this. I'm a huge nod at a game coming down to a kicker. I just put myself in those situations as a fan, and the heartbreak that can all come down to a kicker, such a small portion of the team, that is such a mental mind fuck that can ruin an entire week's worth if your kicker's not on his game. It's funny, we go through a whole week of pro football and it seems like college kickers did better this week. You see LSU upsetting Auburn with a clutch kick to end the game, but NFL kickers couldn't do it. Of course, we all know that the two main culprits, the Browns' now former kicker Zane Gonzalez, he missed 2 field goals and 2 extra points, including an extra point for the Browns to potentially go up 19-18 with under 2 minutes left to go in the game against the Saints. He also missed a game-tying field goal to send that game into overtime after he missed that extra point. The Minnesota Vikings kicker, now former kicker Daniel Carson, went 0 for 3, and 2 of those were in overtime with potential to obviously win the game for the Vikings. Instead, they tied with the Green Bay Packers. Of course, it's worth mentioning since they both got cut. The Browns filled that kicker vacancy with Greg Joseph. Don't know much about that guy. But the Vikings made news because they signed the GOAT, Dan Bailey, to their roster this week. Dan Bailey had previously turned down other offers and apparently liked this one with the Vikings. Too good to pass up with Super Bowl contention written all over him. So hopefully Percy's over there loving that move, even though their game ended in a tie. Speaking of ties, this is the second straight week that the NFL had a game end in a tie, with the Vikings and Packers finishing up overtime tied 29-29. Of course, last week it was another divisional game, the Browns and Steelers, that finished with a tie. And another bonus for the Yeah Fam or Nah variety, of course, is the roughing the passer penalties that have dominated headlines the last couple weeks, especially in that said Packers-Vikings game. There was a roughing the passer penalty committed by Clay Matthews that helped definitely decide the game. Matthews was called for roughing the passer on a play that ended up leading to an interception that would have clinched the victory for the Packers. If you saw the play, you know that they called Clay Matthews for roughing the passer because of his, quote, technique of grabbing the passer from behind the leg or legs, scooping, and pulling in an upward motion. Apparently that is a foul. And since then, the NFL doubled down on saying it was a correct call by saying it would be used as a teaching video of what not to do to show other teams. It is worth noting, in all fairness, the Vikings did get called for a similar call earlier in the game. Eric Kendricks had a similar roughing the passer call committed against him when he tackled Aaron Rodgers. So at least if they're going to be bad, they're consistently bad. That kind of hints at my take on this. I'm a nod to this somehow special treatment of quarterbacks. While I agree we should be protecting the quarterback because he's oftentimes defenseless, now we're critiquing a clean tackle by Clay Matthews that decided a game, and he picked up his legs. Last time I checked, the quarterback still has fucking pads on, so I'm not exactly sure what the issue is here. And then you have non-football players determining this, and then not only letting the call go on the field, they double down on it, on their shitty interpretation, and are going to use it as a teaching video. How about you get fucking consistent referees first before you act like you have some kind of consistent footage of what to show defenders? Every time an NFL player says something, it results in the referees confusing them more because they have no idea what a true tackle it is. And while we're at it, they don't fucking have any clue what a catch is. By the way, Dez caught it. I'd like everyone to know that. From now and forever, Dez Bryant caught it. So overall, week 2, yes, football's back, but I'm a nod to week 2. It was dominated by kickers blowing it and some shitty roughing the passer calls deciding games, and two weeks of NFL football with 2 ties on the books. So far this season has been the equivalent of kissing your sister. Okay, a quick move on to basketball before we head back to a football-dominated one again. Dwayne Wade announcing one final year in the NBA. He signed a veterans minimum 1-year, $2.4 million deal with Miami. Yafim Renard being a fan of the farewell tour retirements. So, I mean, we've seen it a lot in baseball. Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, David Ortiz. Dwayne Wade kind of, in a 10-minute YouTube video, announced that he was coming back for one more season. He's seriously contemplating retirement. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of the hoopla around a player retiring, but I'm a Yafim. I have to put myself in his shoes. If you have the opportunity to go out on your own note and you can do that, why wouldn't you? So many times professional athletes get kicked out of a game unwillingly. Dwayne Wade's going out the way he wants to in Miami. He deserves a farewell tour. Why not? Some people choose not to do that. You often see this the last few times it hasn't happened. Tim Duncan kind of abruptly announced he was retiring, and Manu Ginobili just did the same this offseason. But if you can get one more year and you know it's going to be your last year, I don't see the point in not telling people, because at least that way you're putting it out there and you know you won't have to deal with anything like that again. So I'm a yeah fan. If I was Dwayne Wade, why wouldn't you want the hoopla? Why wouldn't you want people celebrating you? And while we're at it, huge nod to Dwayne Wade will end up finishing his career never having been the highest paid player on his team, which is crazy to me. He's had people higher paid than him like Antoine Walker, yet he has never once been the highest paid player on his team. That is a crazy stat, and probably will be a trivia question later on, so pretty nuts. Okay, and of course the biggest headline just came down was the Browns, good old Cleveland Clowns, found a way to lose again, of course, in dramatic fashion. We already mentioned Zane Gonzalez. But they traded Josh Gordon to the Patriots for a whoppingly huge conditional 5th-round pick. Also, the Patriots get back a 7th-round pick from the Browns if Gordon does not suit up 10 games and play for the Patriots. Okay, so initially the news came out that the Browns were planning to release Gordon. I think he hit one last straw with them, and they decided to go different ways after having dealt with so much with him and his struggle with sobriety, all that. It's very serious but crazy stuff they've had to deal with since taking him in the supplemental draft. He was initially reported as being interested in the Dallas Cowboys or San Francisco 49ers, and it was initially reported that the Browns were not wanting to trade Gordon in the AFC. Yet, what did they do? They got a whopping fucking 5th-round pick back and traded him in the AFC and gave him to an already rich Patriots team. Makes a lot of sense. I'm a big-time nah to the Browns doing this. It seems like they continually make stupid moves like this when I can't imagine Josh Gordon wouldn't draw a better offer than a conditional 5th and helping a good team get better and keeping them on your half of the league. This is classic Browns being Browns. Just when you think they're taking another step, they do something not only to fuck over themselves, but fuck over the rest of the league. Josh Gordon is a hell of a talented player, and he's going to probably the best quarterback of all time in Tom Brady and a team full of weapons. Hell, he even is going on a team that already has the defense's focus of Rob Gronkowski. You can't cover Gordon and Gronkowski double covered, so potentially look for Gordon if he can stay clean, which is a big if in that crazy boring culture in New England, then look for him to have a big season. I'm a nod of the Browns side of this. I just think you could have got something way better for Josh Gordon, especially with how much you stuck out with him over the years. It just seems kind of ridiculous that you got a conditional 5th round pick and potentially could even end up having to send back a 7th to the Patriots. It seems outrageous, and I have to think there's so many other teams that wanted him that could have offered more than a 5th. Okay, that moves us on to likey, no likey, hate it. My good, bad, and ugly from the week in sports. Let's get right into it. You know, I roll from positive to negative. Likey to the Cowboys' defense. For once, the Cowboys have built a team through drafting and their defense. They've been really patient over the years and making wise selections, not just first-round picks, but second, third, fourth-round picks that have really started to pan out. Knock on wood, of course, because Sean Lee's due for an injury here soon. They sacked Eli Manning 6 times, forced a fumble, and they only are due for a little bit more depth when Randy Gregory returns from his concussion this week against the Seahawks, and David Irving finishes serving his 4-game suspension. A bonus was I got to see another classic stupid Eli Manning face. Love those. And Landon Collins, who basically challenged Dak Prescott, got to eat his words big time at the tune of a nice 0-2 seasoning. Another likey, predictable. The Buckeyes picking up a big win against TCU in Jerry World. They got 3 touchdowns in a span of 4 minutes to help seal the victory, and now they get Coach Urban Meyer back after his 3-game suspension is now done. But all roads lead to a big test in 2 weeks in Happy Valley against Penn State. Of course, they don't want to get into a trap game with Tulane this week, but Penn State is coming up quick, and hopefully an injured Nick Bosa, who will sit out this week against Tulane, will be back and ready to go to put pressure on Trace McSorley, and we'll see what happens as one of the primetime matchups in the Big Ten happens one of the first weeks of conference play. Okay, speaking of the conference, no likey to the way the Big Ten is looking right now. The Big Ten West is just atrocious. There's more on that later with Wisconsin. The East is looking better thanks to Ohio State and Penn State, but no likey to the strength of the Big Ten so far. I'm hoping they can get it together and hoping that they look favorable enough to get one of their teams into the college football playoff this season, but so far, not so good. Okay, you knew this was coming. Hate it. Vontae Davis. I mean, what can I say that hasn't been said already? Are you fucking kidding me with this guy? This guy retired at halftime of the Bills game. He was a starting cornerback, had already made one tackle in the first half, decided that this was enough for him and packed up, took off his pads, went home, decided he was retiring, and didn't tell any of his teammates. What a fucking quitter. What a fucking wuss. Of course, what was entertaining is some old tweets of his surfacing talking about not quitting and never giving up. So ironic. I just absolutely hate this. Never made it past varsity sports, but the idea of quitting when you're a professional athlete, when most people would kill for that opportunity, just seems so ridiculous. This guy's a 10-year veteran and decided at halftime to quit on his team. He couldn't last another 30 minutes to compete with this team who was all putting on the line there. Yes, the Bills aren't good, but you have essentially one of 64 possible positions as a starting cornerback in the NFL, and you give that up willy-nilly just because your team's doing bad and you're a fucking quitter. He released the Instagram post after saying he just didn't have it in him anymore. Fuck that, man. If you're a quitter, and I think other Bills players felt the same way, They don't want him in the locker room anyway. I fucking hate the look of this. You know, when you're on a bad team, we've all been there. Hopefully we've all been there. I've been there before. It's tough. But as a bench warmer, I never even thought about quitting, let alone being a starter in the NFL. So fuck Vontae Davis. Hate it to this guy quitting on his team and retiring at halftime. I hope he's never welcomed in another NFL locker room again if he decides to unretire. And he sure as hell won't ever be welcome in Buffalo. That's not the Bills Mafia way. And I feel for his teammates that we're counting on him. You know, these guys have a livelihood and they're helped by each other. It's a team sport. A guy quitting on a team is not good for any player's bottom line. So, definite hate it to Vontae Davis. Good luck in retirement, I guess. Actually, fuck it. I don't wish you good luck, Vontae. Once a quitter, always a quitter. Now it's time for Lottie Frickin' Da, where we highlight the best of the worst, the impressively unimpressive, of players in losing or garbage time putting up big numbers. First up, as promised, like I told you I'd talk about later, the Wisconsin Badgers. So Wisconsin gets by the last couple years scheduling cupcakes, no tough opponents, even reaching a Big Ten championship last year with a chance to go undefeated before they ran into my Buckeyes, of course. Wisconsin lost to an unranked BYU team at home in Camp Randall, 24-21. And yes, it was close, but Wisconsin was playing from behind all game. Their, quote, tough out-of-conference opponent, BYU, managed to beat them in their own place. Lottie frickin' Da to Wisconsin. That's what you get for not scheduling real opponents. Another couple, some big-name quarterbacks from this week in losing efforts. Ben Roethlisberger had a whopping 60 pass attempts, completing 39 of them for 452 yards with 3 touchdowns. He also added in a rushing touchdown. But his Steelers lost 42-37 to Pat Mahomes' Chiefs, which, by the way, Pat Mahomes tossed 6 touchdowns, so he must really be the truth. And the other one, a former MVP, Cam Newton, passed for 335 yards on 32 of 45 attempts, had 3 touchdowns and 1 pick, added another 42 yards on the ground on just 5 carries. But the Panthers lost to a short-handed Falcons team without Keanu Neal or Deion Jones, 31-24. So Lottie frickin' Da to Super Bowl champion Ben Roethlisberger and former MVP Cam Newton. Nobody's exempt from this section, and you are no different. Okay, next up is should they be worried? And should they be worried is kind of going to be different this week because it's going to lead right into who you got. Because my worried one will feed right into essentially a pick'em. So the first should they be worried, run-of-the-mill, Florida State, Percy's Florida State Seminoles lost another one. Should they be worried? Florida State and head coach Willie Taggart, who just joined the team this year, after only 1 season at Oregon, by the way, and, of course, shout out to me and Akshat for calling this as our disappointing hire. The Seminoles are 1-2 and 0-2 in the conference after losing to Syracuse 30-7, which was their first loss to Syracuse since 1966. Yikes. Overall, if we're focusing more on Willie Taggart, he shouldn't be worried yet. It's still his first season. He still seems confident. I don't know about this season and maybe lost, but it seems far-fetched to think that a coach would be gone after even just part of a season. So in that sense, they shouldn't be worried. But overall, the state of the program, they're going to need some major rebounding because the ACC outside of Clemson seems wide open for the taking, and Florida State should be one of those perennial powerhouses that's in contention. There's no excuse for an 0-2 start to the conference and 1-2 overall. So overall, they need to be on red alert, but not quite full-on panic. Need to have their high beams on, but Willie Taggart is not off to a great start. Maybe that's what happens when you don't stay somewhere longer than a year. The next should they be worried has to do with the NFL's 0-2 teams. So history says that just 1 out of 9 will make the playoffs after starting 0-2. So, our should they be worried is for those 0-2 teams, which, by the way, are the Bills, Texans, Raiders, Giants, Lions, Cardinals, and after Monday night, the Seahawks. As a bonus, we included the 0-1-1 teams, the Steelers and Browns. And with those 0-1-1 teams, we magically get to 9. So, my should they be worried that works its way into who you got is which 0-2 team, or if we're including the 0-1-1 teams, should not be worried. As for my pick, if we're including the 0-1-1 teams, I know it's low-hanging fruit, but I say the Steelers shouldn't be worried yet. I think they've beat themselves, and their defense doesn't look very impressive, but they seem they're a little rusty and distracted from the Le'Veon Bell situation, but I think their championship pedigree will eventually take over, and they'll kind of right the ship. If we're excluding the 0-1-1 teams and just focusing on the 0-2, I'm going to go with the Giants. I was tempted to go with the Texans, but the Jaguars are just too impressive, and the rest of the AFC seems pretty competitive. I'll go with the Giants just because the NFC East is wide open. Everyone else besides the Giants is just 1-1, and it seems like it's competitive every year. The Giants seem like they have an improved offensive line. It's just one that needs to play together more, so I think they'll right the ship. The Cowboys beat the Giants based off of scheme more than anything else. You could tell the offensive line was improving, but they just didn't have that flow and that gel to their team yet, with new additions like Nate Solder to the offensive line, a rookie Will Hernandez, an injured center, that sort of thing. Eric Flowers doing a little bit better at right tackle after being atrocious last year at left tackle. So I just think they need to play together more, get their run game going a little better with Saquon Barkley, and get the ball more to Odell Beckham. He's the highest paid for a reason. So I'm going to go with the Giants, but if we're included the 0-1-1 teams, I'll go with the Steelers. And we'll segue that into who you got and what you're feeling. I already made the first pick of the week, but I wanted to recap last week's picks before I move on to the rest of this week's. So last episode, Percy and I picked a college game, a pro game, and a little bit of a different one. So we went over the number 12 LSU Tigers visiting the number 7 Auburn Tigers. They were both 2-0. LSU had a rough schedule to open up. Percy, of course, went with the spread and what everyone else thought. In Auburn, I went with my heart and former Buckeye Joey Burrow and ended up being right somehow. LSU pulled off the upset. They were down 21-10 in the second half and still found a way to hit a game-winning field goal as time expired. How about Joey B? 3-0 start. LSU being 2 ranked teams in the top 10 out of the first 3 weeks. But it's worth noting they do have another tough stretch coming up starting in mid-October. They're all home games, and it is a homestand, but they face current number 2 Georgia, current number 14 Mississippi State, and then number 1 Alabama. So they get kind of a 3-week stretch of weaker opponents, but they do have another hefty challenge to get through. So far so good for LSU, but fans are still holding their breath, and it'll work itself out. Those people that hate on the SEC like myself, they all can't make it. So between Alabama, Georgia, and LSU, there's only one spot from that section in the SEC championship, so we'll see what happens. Okay, and the NFL game we picked was the Patriots at Jaguars. They were both 1-0. New England was slightly favored by 2 points. Percy and I both went with the Patriots. Seemed like a lot of people did. Percy made that bold statement saying they'd win by more than 17, and then doubled down on another bold statement saying the Browns would beat the Saints by double digits. I'm thrilled with losing this one because now Percy has to support the Buckeyes unwaveringly for the rest of the year. So go Bucks, Percy, by the way. But he was wrong on both bold predictions. Yeah, there were toasty takes, and got to respect the man for him, but he's got to pay the price just like he wagered up for himself. Of course, the Jaguars won 31-20. They put the ball in Blake Bortles' hands for once, and Bortles looked great, even without Leonard Fournette behind him. So they got their mini revenge from the AFC Championship last year. I focused on the Rob Gronkowski advantage, and he was totally shut down by the Jags. The Jags defense was flying around and totally dominated the Patriots. And then our fun pick from last episode was the rookie hype we were buying more. Saquon Barkley versus Sam Darnold, both New York draft selections. Barkley number 2 for the Giants and Darnold number 3 for the Jets. Percy was buying Darnold's hype more, and I went with Barkley just to be different. Of course, they both took a slight step back in week 2. The Cowboys shut down Barkley on the ground, but he did have a record 14 receptions for 80 yards, while Darnold's Jets kind of came back to earth after whooping on the Lions in week 1. They lost 20-12 to Miami. Darnold had a bonus Lottie frickin' dog game. He had a 334 yards passing on 25 of 41, but just 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions with his team losing Miami, of course. So a bonus Lottie frickin' da, just to kind of prove my point a little bit more so far in week 2. We'll see how they both project. People are still believing Darnold's the truth. You had Chris Collinsworth on Sunday Night Football saying didn't know how the Giants passed on Darnold, but we'll see. That'll be a long-term thing to monitor. This week, same recipe. Wanted to do a college and a pro game to pick. First up is a college game. I've covered them before, but this was by far the best matchup of a little bit of a weaker week 4. Number 7 Stanford's traveling to Eugene, Oregon to face the Ducks, who are ranked number 20. They're both 3-0, and it's essentially a toss-up game. Stanford's favored by 1 as a visiting team. Oregon's relatively untested. I think I'm going to go with Stanford controlling the clock and getting a big road victory. But it's worth noting that Stanford has Oregon this week and then has to follow that up by traveling to South Bend to face Notre Dame. So maybe this is a trap game and they're looking ahead to Notre Dame and Oregon pulls off the upset. So we'll see. I'm going with Stanford, though. I like the run game. Kind of neutralizes things. High-powered offense. Can't score a lot if you're controlling the clock. And a little bit of a different one, NFL pick. I wanted to focus on 2 struggling teams. So the Giants are visiting Houston to face the Texans. They're both 0-2. One of them will leave 0-3. I guess we shouldn't assume that with the ties we've had. But Houston's favored by 1 point at home. I'm going to go with the Texans. I think the Giants struggled against the mobility of Dak Prescott in their last game. And Deshaun is even faster and more mobile, more creative. So, and pair that with a go-to receiver like DeAndre Hopkins taking advantage of the Giants secondary. Those kind of things help make me think that the Texans will pull off the victory and get their first one on the board. I do think if the Giants line struggled against DeMarcus Lawrence and the Hot Boys, the Cowboys defense, then J.J. Watt is going to wreak real havoc on their line, especially if whoever lines up opposite of Eric Flowers. So I'm going with the Texans there. Could very well be wrong on both those picks, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it. As for what I'm feeling lately, definitely the rare feat these days of the Cowboys and Buckeyes winning on the same weekend. We all know the feeling when our pro and college teams win on the same weekend. It's a good feeling heading to work Monday, knowing that both of your squads won. Got to wear victory polo Monday with my Cowboys on the left chest. And also a bonus, hosting friends for the Buckeyes game. I was acting a fool yelling at the screen, but my friends still love me anyway, so shout out to them. Definitely feeling that. And of course, wrap up every episode with my too much sense. Love giving that advice. It's usually way more than 2 cents worth, so hence the name, TOO, much sense. This week, it's about being truthful. Tell people like it is, even if it results in some of those people not liking you. I think it's better to be liked by a select few who know the real you instead of being liked by the masses who only know a fake version of you. People don't always want to hear the truth, but they sure will appreciate it. And they'll know they can go to you for it. So strive to be one of those truth tellers. It'll result in quality friendships, quality relationships, because they know they can count on you for it. And I saw a quote one time watching the movie The Big Short. It's a quote that appears on the screen. Truth is like poetry, and most people fucking hate poetry. There's worse things to be known for. All right, that'll wrap up another episode of Prem Brulee. We appreciate you tuning in again. The number one podcast in your headphones. Don't ever get it twisted. We'll be back for another episode talking about the latest in the week of sports. Appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe, follow, share, provide feedback, all that good stuff. And check out the other Holyfield podcast. Thank you very much.